Our last reader is Joe Phelan. He returned to the Fox Valley in 2022 after a 7-year exile, as he put it. He now lives in St. Charles with his wife, sons, and his intrepid rescue poodle, Ignatius. It was a dog. I had to find out the name, Ignatius, and when I found out it was the character, named after the character in Confederacy of Dunces, kind of had to include it. So Joe's poetry has appeared in such places as Ecstasis Magazine, Maudlin House, Lit Magazine, and After Hours, a journal of Chicago writing and art. Please welcome him to the stage.
Thanks, folks. Wonderful to be here. I'm really honored to be reading with all of these esteemed writers in the Fox Valley. And Ignatius, he would be here if he could, but he had other plans tonight. So, this first poem is called Some Advice. Constriction, as sole strategy, reliably backfires, like a rust-bitten mercury. The object of effort to pin and pen springs loose, shooting sidelong from the narrowing vice. Over a winding county road and the undulant driftless, I once saw an ochre-striped snake writhe free from the tightening talons of a red-tailed hawk. Don't overthink it, lest the jitters ensue. You can't diagram a September sunset. Calm resolve and measured breath will suffice to assure the completion of a kettlebell farmer's carry up and down the asphalt drive. This is the image, unromantic as a tax filing extension, that offers assurance when conveying forward precious sundries and delicate cargo. Heirloom spode china, sleeping children, new love, and the articles of faith. This next one is called Night Swimming. It was published a couple months ago by Maudlin House, which is a kind of a cool zine, got like a pop art aesthetic, published here in Chicago. Night Swimming. After the boys were in bed, I'd haul across the bright brine roads of January to the heated pool and delve into chlorinated luminescence. After crunching through crags of sallow snow, the night swim. 64 laps, a solitary fantasia in the far lane, hurling resonant strokes and buoying my pink mass with nasal blasts, rising goggled and dizzy from the flip turn, facing the immense window, a dime-thin veil between humid steam heads and frost-stemmed tails. Years before, darker compline dips in Northwoods lakes, slick wooden planks and dock moss underfoot. Overhead, the throbbing firmament. No greater courage at 13, talking to girls accepted, than a running leap, a cannonball of faith, into waters known only at noon. The first toe to catch a frond, a thrill of blind fathoms, could be a pike snout. Come up quick and bolt back Sandy, through the center aisle of the mosquitoes assembly, toward the A-frame cabin's glow. They warn against this in the Pacific. Many curious and some hungry presences encircle the volcanic beaches. We do it anyway. Only up to the waist, 3 pineapple Mai Tais deep, and feeling the trade winds on your sunburn. Returning from last call, in the city by the lake, my buddy with the cinematic oeuvre, out of daring or despair, takes off his shoes and hat and drives 5 feet down into the churning inlet. Well, I can't let him die like this, I think. I once placed him freestyle. I forfeit my effects to her third companion while the malort roiled within. Inward and downward, outward and onward, I was carried away from rocky Edgewater by the wine-dark swell. Spitting, coughing, suspended over the deep, pausing my paddling to reverence the spangled escarpment of skyline, I spied a sopping figure wade on to the beach. This one is called an anchorite on Maine, and it's inspired by what happens inside of me every time I go into a Zoom call. An anchorite on Maine. It helps to envision a core they cannot reach, a place of ivy and solitary stone, raptured right into contemplation. In this cloister, where the pale roundel pours light through leaded panes, a dimly familiar fullness persists. Outside, they make a point of throwing whatever they can, alerts, requests, reminders, good faith with bad. But, so ensconced, the cadence is coherent to seasons, silent fasts and secret feasts observed with slight and furtive gestures. And this one is called Varmints. It's not quite a poem, it's kind of a sort of a meditation, but it's funny, there was talk of squirrels earlier, so this is in keeping with that theme. And my wife and I, since we moved back to the Fox Valley, I forgot how many critters are around here. And we've got a raccoon that lives behind our detached garage that we call Elvis because of his fondness for peanut butter and jelly sandwich crusts for my kids. So this is for Elvis. Varmints. While we traverse distances to marvel at certain fauna, what shall we make of the suspect company of our residential biosphere, who, like children, often bring no gifts but themselves? Maybe a pea of gravel inserted gnomically under cushions, or an overturned candle mistaken for a jar of jelly and discarded rashly at the first taste of wax? Sod poodles or such like, they might be called elsewhere. Our naming rights gain latitude with retreating horizons and embolden in proportion to the extremity of our environs. A phenomenon related to frontier tall tales and fish stories. Recently, my wife placed a ring camera on our bird feeder, expecting bright finches or crimson cardinal eminences. Instead, we see passing tufts of mottled fur, like Ben Franklin moving through a Parisian fete. And below, all the precious seed is strewn and gathers in the slats to dampen and ferment. I like to entertain the notion of a farmhouse deck ale, an awaited seasonal, dripping down to the delight of the mundane mammalia, a little heady for the chipmunks, but preferred by the possums. One summer 2 decades ago, a family of raccoons shared my parents' underdeck with a passel of polecats. Scarce shelter breeds unlikely bedfellows, even in the exurbs. You'd hear them exchange pleasantries as they skulked homeward together in the early hours. For rent, they brought jumping fleas and glandular aromas to the backyard mise en scène. Still, the quarter-acre was desolate when Trapper Jerry dispatched the skunks one by one. The fire department had been called deep in the night of late winter. Our stink badgers had a domestic row and released their melodious thiols in concert, which were mistaken for a block-endangering gas leak. And the raccoons left later of their own accord, perhaps joining the Prairie State Exodus. I had a personal confrontation with their patriarch on a humid midsummer morning. Hearing them titter, wired with coffee, I stomped on the plates, opened the spigot cover, and peered down. I leapt several feet above my previous record and cursed in crackling soprano pitch when I found myself an inch from an Eskimo kiss with Zorro. Only slightly perturbed, he repositioned the cover with opposable thumbs and returned to his bedtime routine. Our first summer in the centenarian Foursquare, Ignatius, a street mutt from Guadalajara, acquired a taste for local mole and vole, to universal dismay. Preying upon the nearly blind does not win admirers. A band of chipmunks now occupies their deserted tunnel, and they carry out guerrilla operations on the house. Well, don't be too certain of your distinction or the infallibility of your categories, I think, scanning the permeable fence line. The undeveloped gaps are great plains that brim fraternally, and the oldest silence inhabits the spaces of extinction when you're finally left alone. And this last one was published by Ecstasis Magazine in their spring collection, but it's really it's got some fall vibes, so should be appropriate, hopefully. A conspiracy observed. Once you notice it, you see it everywhere. A call and response, coded warbles across suspended cables. Even the stance of goldenrod, in bowed and synchronized array, a numinous subterfuge and a collusion of elements. The jig is up when the oaks and ashes show their true colors. Illuminati surely, and scouting parties of ravening gulls are sighted skirting the established lines, settled by the treaties of summer. Imagine my own embarrassment at the accretion of evidence, arcane though indisputable. A dupe, a rube. The skeptic turns, mutters, and diverts his desire. Thank you.